Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask Jenks, our social media series that features you, our Jenks citizens. We are actually back today for part 2 of our very special planning process. We have our panelists back. Thank you for being here. We have Rob Sellers, who's with our Planning Commission, Marcae Hilton, our Planning Department Director, Mayor Cory Box of Jenks, and we have Charlotte Montgomery, who's been a Jenks resident for 18 years and very involved in our City Council and Planning Commission committees. So we want to thank you guys for being here. We're really excited to continue our discussion from our last series, which was our part 1. I know, Charlotte, you had mentioned something to me about what citizens, as a citizen, you hear things from your neighbors, and I think because you're so engaged, people reach out to you. So earlier, we were discussing some stuff about transparency and maybe comparing to other cities. Do you want to maybe just start that question for us?
Yes. Not only do I have on an ongoing basis questions about how is our planning process similar or what differentiates us from nearby cities such as Bixby, Broken Arrow, Tulsa. How do we compare to their processes? Are we ahead of the curve in involving stakeholders, citizens, property owners? Where are we at compared to others?
So I've been in the field of planning for almost 12 years or a little over 12 years and worked for the city of Broken Arrow, and for 4 years worked for the city of Bixby for 4 years. So I can speak specifically regarding those two, and then in general terms about the whole metro area and the state. So like I said previously, Bixby is not a statutory city, so they don't necessarily have the same requirements that we have. So we follow all of the state statute, and then we allow additional things. So my planning commission chair, whoever it is at the time, and it does change occasionally, they will have their own style, they'll have their own desires, and they will implement that accordingly. And the planning commission generally will agree to it. And we've not adopted Robert's rules, which is a little bit confusing sometimes for people. So because of that, we have a little more, we're a little bit more relaxed on the process. So we have an established process, but that can change according to the will of the planning commission and ultimately the will of the council if you want to give more time or less time or something. But as far as notices go, we follow state statute, but in regards to comprehensive land use, we've gone above and beyond. And when I was at the city previously, I established that there. So I think in broad terms that we have done a really good job at the city of Jenks. The leadership at the city of Jenks is very interested in the public input and really values the public process. And I think it feels frustrating a lot of times. I hear from the public, hey, I just learned about this. I don't feel like I have time. Well, at least we have the statutory process that allows us as much time as we have. And I think having these types of conversations is very helpful whenever you're able to sit down. That also helps with the education process. If people understand the process, then I think that there's less fear when projects come forward. But public engagement is really important, and you hear from the public, and oftentimes you learn something or a perspective that you didn't necessarily have before. And I can sit down and look at something on paper, but a neighbor can show up and have a comment or a concern that I was unaware of, I didn't know. And that's the same with the Planning Commission and Council. So grade-wise, I think that the City of Jenks does a great job, but ultimately it's the citizens who will grade us. And I think that staff is very accessible. So if you have questions and want things, reach out to us, call us, email us. Email is probably the best way to reach me personally, but.
Well, I'll just give you my perspective because, I get to meet with mayors and city managers almost monthly. When I first got to council, we had significant experience on our council. So we adopted the attitude of we were self-sufficient. We didn't need as much citizen input. At least that's how it felt to me, sitting in that far right chair, watching people talk about planning that have been doing it for a long time. And then I'm leading this council in 2021, and we're all relatively new. And I quickly realized that we really need to open up the door to some additional dialogue because we really needed the help. We needed citizen engagement. I would say the answer to your question, if I compare Jenks to some of the municipalities around us, I think we're doing exceedingly well in the areas of transparency and encouraging a dialogue, as you know, and you know because you have to sit and wait for people to quit talking. I don't think it's very rare that I ever give anybody time limits. This is not the United States Senate where it's so frustrating they have to speak in under 5 minutes and then they have to reclaim their time. We allow people to babble or give very good comments for 3 to 17 minutes. I think we've allowed people to talk. I think that inspires a little bit of trust, and I think sometimes you get your best ideas and your best thoughts when people finally get past the nervousness of being there. A couple minutes in is when they really start to give you that real value. So if we're going to limit people's time, then sometimes you never really get what they were intended, what they really wanted to say when they get there. So you can go right across town, right across Tulsa County, and you go to a city council meeting and you'll see a timer and you will see people talk and then abruptly stopped at 3 to 5 minutes, and they never got to say what they wanted to say and their time is up. So from a dialogue perspective and from a transparency perspective and back to doing this, I think we're doing exceedingly well. I think there's a lot of room to improve. I think we can do better. But the bottom line is, why are we doing this? Because zoning and planning is the absolute hardest thing we do. And even after 8 years, I feel like I walk into every meeting torn because I'm conflicted with emotion and then law. And the emotional guy in me wants to hug people into a good decision, and then the law says you can't do that. So this is very difficult, but I think we're doing pretty well from a leadership perspective. And even our planning commissioner, the chair, has reached out to me the last year saying, I've liked your style of allowing people to go and talk. And I think even the planning commission is maybe, I think the chair is starting to have a little bit of a different tone and a little more of a free-form exchange of ideas. And I've encouraged him to do that because I think it only makes the expectation easier. When somebody goes to the planning commission and they're welcomed and they get a little bit of grace to speak a little past the amount of time, then they come and they get the same thing from me and they expect the same thing from council. So I think we're doing really well in that regard.
That is true from the commission standpoint, is that we do leave the floor open to citizen comment as long as they will come up and talk to us. Obviously once people are tired of talking, then they'll stop coming up and then we'll go on and start debating the issue at hand. But for us as a commission, we want to hear that because we don't know what the impact is for that development. For what's the developer done for a previous or a adjacent development that they've done maybe? What's the impact of the city with regards to a second, third, fourth Mexican restaurant? Who knows? So it's just one of those things where we want to hear that so that we can make a good, informed decision based upon the law.
And if I may add one other thing, it just popped in my head, and you haven't heard me say this before, but years and years of accusations of the good old boy program, right? The same developers getting the same favors happens everywhere. Well, I've just made the decision, anytime I meet with somebody who's willing to make an investment in Jenks, it's an old military term, two-person integrity. I do not have meetings with investors or developers without at least a second counselor there. There's a gentleman in Jenks wants to spend a lot of money, wants to meet mayor, when can we have lunch? Well, first of all, you can't buy me lunch. Not allowed to do that. And secondly, what ward is it in? We need to make sure we have counselor so-and-so there. That way there's at least two-person integrity. I always ask them, have you talked to her first? Have you talked to Chris Stroud first? Why are they coming directly to city council for the favor when we need to make sure it's even lawful or if it's appropriate? So two-person integrity is working well. And I've even noticed when some people ask to meet with me and I say, let me make sure I can get my counselor or my vice mayor there, they're less interested in meeting. That's a meeting that didn't need to happen. So we're kind of doing that in the background as well. I think it's good cover for everybody, and it eliminates those opportunities to people to maybe necessarily pick on one particular commissioner or counselor, saying, private meetings are really not, it's not the business we need to be in.
No.
So
And
sorry
it is,
to jump off.
it's important to note that, like, I think all of you mentioned at one point or the other is, picking up the phone or emailing is really important in this process. And what sets Jenks apart, I think, is we have people in City Hall that you can talk to a person when you call there. So we aren't sending you off to wait on a line or anything like that. So it's really important for people that are coming to do business here, citizens that are trying to engage with us, that you can reach out to us by email or phone call, and you will get to talk to someone in that department, not just someone that is on a contract or anything like that. So it's important. We really value that in Jenks. So that's all the positive. Let's hear maybe some of the negative that comes out to our mayor, to our staff, about roads and developments and infrastructure and how that all intersects and why we're approving things and why we're not approving things. So I know it's very complicated, but who wants to start?
Oh, don't get me started.
So it sounds like here.
Well, I'll throw out the most common questions, my top 10. Why do you keep building neighborhoods in South Jenks? Really anywhere, but South Jenks specifically. And why don't you build the roads and improve the infrastructure before you build the neighborhoods? So I get those a lot. Help me answer those questions.
From a commission standpoint, we get those same questions. I'm sure Charlotte's heard them in the meetings that we've had with the commission. I can tell you that we're not in the traffic business. We are in the land use business as far as the commission's concerned. I totally understand the need for infrastructure. But where does that infrastructure come from? It comes from revenues, and the revenues or bonds have to be paid for by those revenues. And in order to have revenues, you have to have commerce. And so it's a vicious cycle of what comes first, the money or the roads. And the money has to come first. We can't bankrupt the city, and the city has got a checkbook that it has to operate from. And so from that, when a developer comes to present their plan and what they want to do with their land, we have to base it on the law and on what the structure of that law is. And those are the decisions that we make. I totally get the traffic situation. I see the traffic going south on Elm between 111th and 121st, 131st. We will fix that, but it's going to take time. The things that are happening in the city now are great for us. The outlet malls here, the revenue that we're generating from the new restaurants, and all of that is going to be beneficial to the city, which allows us to do the infrastructure that's already planned. But we still have developments that want to go in. People want to live in Jenks. They like Jenks. We're greatly situated for this part of the community, for the Tulsa County. We have to take advantage of that as well as put in the infrastructure. Yes, there will be some inconveniences, but we will do a better job at it.
Perfect. Do you have anything to add, Marcae?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that, especially when you're talking about down south. When I came to the city of Jenks, the data that we got during our comprehensive plan update was we were 75% built out. That was 4.5 years ago. If you count approved PUDs with approved site plans and so it would have a specified density. If you look at all of that, we are probably close. We probably have definitely less than 10% raw land left. And the city of Jenks and this metro area and Oklahoma, by and large, has never instituted a policy where the developer is required to build the streets. If you go to, I'm not saying never, but in general, that is not how Oklahoma development works. So if you go to Kansas, there's some areas that they have different processes in place that puts that burden on the developer. If you go to Texas, there are different programs and processes in place that puts that burden on the developer. But in Oklahoma, it really isn't the case. Also, you have to remember that we abut other communities. So a lot of times a street project isn't just a City of Jenks project. Sometimes it's county, because there are some roads in the City of Jenks that are county roads, and then we're adjacent to other municipalities. So we have 3 different school systems, and when people are moving here, not all of them are going to be in the Jenks public school system. And so their trajectory in the mornings and in the evenings are going to be a different direction, because they're not taking their kids north or, to the high school or whatever, or to the middle school. And then you have Bixby Public Schools, so that sends a lot of people south. So there's a lot of coordination and moving parts. We have our own traffic study that's dedicated different streets, but we have a very small amount of land left, and I don't see, I could be wrong, but I don't see it changing. I believe that how it will move forward, that land is it's very valuable, and there are the last pieces of land people are wanting it, and it will develop sooner rather than later. And we have a plan for it in our comprehensive plan, and people get worried about the school districts. So the schools, maybe they don't have enough teachers, they don't have enough classrooms. Well, they have consultants that look at our land use plan that say, hey, the City of Jenks estimates that this is going to be 5 dwelling units per acre, and they have 80 acres right here. So they know in advance that there's probably going to be that many homes coming into that area. So it's not a big surprise. That's why we have the land use plan and why it's important to keep it updated. But we're probably not going to be asking the developers to chip in at this time in the game. It would have been great if we had started it in the beginning, and all of those homes in the South, those developers and those homeowners helped pave the way for new development. But at this point, with so little raw land left, and knowing that it is going to sell sooner rather than later, it will be developed, probably be fully developed in the next 10, 15 years.
Do you see, and you give the short answer, doesn't have to be, do you see any scenario in which you would recommend a full stop to residential development down south? That residents ask me for a moratorium.
Sure.
Does the law support that? Do we have any authority under what would be the lever that needs to be pulled for us to say, you don't even accept another residential application?
Sure. The short answer is no. I
There's
don't
not
see a
one scenario.
If suddenly we had a full collapse of our sanitary sewer for everything south of, we'll say 121st, like, oh great, the lines are broken, you can't do it, that would be a good reason to have a moratorium. But we have public streets. They may not be as wide or as convenient as we want, but they are public streets. And we do have access, and we have designations. And one thing that we do now that's never been done in the City of Jenks, if you create more than 150 trips at peak time, then you have to do a traffic study. And we haven't even had one fully done because it's so new to the city. But if that had been done from the beginning, maybe our street process design would have been different. Maybe how we did subdivisions would have been different. So we're at the end. We're not at the beginning. We're not a baby little city getting ready to develop. We're a fully developed city, and we have a lot of growing pains in the next 20 years.
And we could always put in place a moratorium, but then the legal challenges that would come towards that, and we'd be spending all of our money on legal fees instead of trying to build infrastructure.
Well, that's a good point, and that gets back to the question, the comment I made earlier, that residents should be very careful about how much power they give to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. Can you imagine if we had the authority to say no to things that are legal, that have been legal for the last 20, 30, 40 years? And trust me, there's the guy in me that I used to live in Eddington Place. I used to drive up when Landon was little and turn the corner and stop and see the cows. They'd come right up to the fence. And that's the way I want it to be. And that's the way it would be nice if it stayed that way. And now there's multiple homes there. It's, before I got involved, but, you guys have made some great comments. This land will develop at some point. And frankly, I hear from the sellers of the property too, the grandkids are now inheriting all this pasture and farmland, and there's no money. They don't want to do what grandfather did for a living. They can maybe squeak out a 90 to 100,000. If they're lucky, they can make 6 figures a year, raising cattle and selling it in a more complicated market. But when the developer comes along and says, I'll give you piles of money, grandkids are selling that property. They have a legal right to. The seller has a legal right to buy it. And unfortunately, what do we get? Another neighborhood we don't want. And most people really, who said it earlier, we love to see the pastures and the farmland. There's nothing we can do to kind of make sure that it stays that way unless we change our form of government completely. And that's the hard part about leading, is your heart wants one thing and the law says something completely different.
I've had several conversations with the other residents recently because they do now understand that with all the economic development coming in, that there is going to be a period of time where we have to wait for revenue to come in to be able to build some of the roads that are needed. And they also understand that at this time, having developer impact fees to offset that is not going to likely happen. And so we have very reluctantly come to a conclusion that there may be a need now for our community to have the discussion about having a bond like we did have for the current road expansion on Elm, Peoria from 111th to 131st. Is it time again to ask the citizens, do we need to look? I know I don't want to go there either, but if that is our main complaint and we want it to happen sooner than later, then let's go to the people and ask them.
These are all such great points. I learn something every time I'm with you all. So Cory wants a bond is what. No, I'm just kidding. Got that. Got that.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
No, we need to know what the citizens feel about that. If it's truly something that they want sooner than later, then just as with the project from 111th to 131st on Elm Peoria, then give us that voice, have us make a choice.
That totally open to that. What do people want? It'd be nice to know that the citizens would support this before we actually go to the polls and spend a lot of time and money investing to research it.
And if the result would be that the citizens as a majority vote to say, no, we don't want to do that, then we do have to have an exercise in patience.
Yes, we do.
What do you think about it, the 2020 bond election? Everything that was approved, there's not one shovel that's been put in the dirt, right?
The Peoria Elm project.
Well, so the things that nobody does.
Yeah,
see.
no one sees anything.
You're at work and you drive home and the utility pole's been moved and you barely notice it because the pole's brown. It's not gray anymore.
That's right.
That was almost 5 years ago. We all approved this, and we're still waiting and waiting for these projects to happen.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see if the appetite was there.
And you have to go through a design phase, and then you have to go through any types of right-of-ways, and then you have to bid out the projects, and then you might see some stuff happening.
There's a lot of red tape that I think sometimes we don't, if you're not engaged or if you don't work for the city, that you don't completely understand with these projects. When we have something approved, this does not mean it's approved and it's starting the next month. This means it's approved and that just starts the process of everything that takes years. So, but I'm so appreciative of everyone being here. Thank you for taking the time for to give this information to our citizens, but also to just engage with each other. I love hearing how everyone works together and how processes work. So I really appreciate all of you doing this. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. This was a very special series. We are really appreciative of all our panelists. So if you have questions for Ask Jenks, as we move forward, we're going to be doing more things like this and still answering specific questions. Please visit jenks.com. You'll see a graphic on the homepage that says Ask Jenks. You could submit your questions there. You can always call us or email us as well and submit your question. And until next time, this is Ask Jenks.